Good morning. It's great to be with you. Thank you to our hosts, CTIA and GSMA, the peanut butter and jelly, if you will, of wireless trade associations. Now, by my accounting, this is the fourth iteration of this joint venture and is the third time that I've been a part of it. I did a fireside chat at last year's Mobile World Congress in Los Angeles. I was there for your first joint venture in 2017 when you co-hosted Mobile World Congress Americas in San Francisco. And now here we are together on our laptops and tablets for the GSMA Thrive North America /CTIA Summit. Now, while the names and locations of this event might have changed over the years, there has been one constant: 5G. Back in 2017, 5G was a big focus of my remarks, but back then, 5G was largely hypothetical and aspirational. Well, this year, I'm speaking to you just a few days after the release of the first 5G iPhone. Over the past 3+ years, 5G has gotten real, very real. And so you might ask, how did we get from there to here? Well, obviously, many of you in the audience led the way. But I would like to think that the FCC put a tailwind at your back. I'd like to walk through some of the actions that we've taken at the FCC to accelerate the arrival of the 5G revolution. At the FCC, we dubbed our strategy to promote the development and deployment of next-generation wireless our 5G Fast Plan. And that plan had three basic parts. Number one, freeing up more spectrum for the commercial marketplace. Number two, making it easier to deploy the wireless infrastructure of the future. And number three, modernizing our regulations to promote fiber deployment. Now on spectrum, we have pursued an aggressive, all-of-the-above approach. We are freeing up high-band, mid-band, and low-band spectrum for 5G. Now, in terms of high-band spectrum, that of course enables high-speed, gigabit-plus wireless connectivity. Last year, the FCC successfully concluded our nation's first two auctions of millimeter wave spectrum for 5G in the 28 GHz and 24 GHz bands, respectively. Earlier this year, we concluded bidding in an auction of the upper 37, 39, and 47 GHz bands. This is the largest auction in American history, releasing 3,400 megahertz of spectrum into the commercial marketplace. All told, we have made available almost 5 gigahertz of high-band spectrum for commercial use through these auctions. To put that in perspective, that was more spectrum than was used for terrestrial mobile broadband by all wireless service providers in the United States combined. Now, with respect to low-band spectrum, we have finished repurposing spectrum in the 600 megahertz band, which was long used for broadcast television for mobile broadband. To clear the 600 megahertz band for wireless use, roughly half of our nation's broadcast TV stations, nearly 1,000 total, had to change their transmission frequencies. This summer, we completed this enormous undertaking, known as the repack. And now, all of the valuable low-band airwaves sold in the groundbreaking broadcast incentive auction are available for wireless broadband service. And this spectrum is already being used to provide 5G service to areas where over 200 million Americans live. Now, I got a glimpse of the 5G future for this band during a visit to Nevada, where I saw a T-Mobile deployment delivering over 180 megabits per second using 600 megahertz spectrum, transmitted from an antenna almost a mile away. Now, since we rolled out the 5G Fast Plan, I'd actually say we've made the most headway on mid-band spectrum. Mid-band spectrum, of course, is appealing for 5G largely because of physics. It combines good coverage with strong capacity. And under my direction, the FCC has systematically identified mid-band airwaves that were being underused or even unused and set plans in place to put these airwaves to work for the American people. In July 2019, the FCC adopted flexible new rules for the 2.5 gigahertz band. This is our nation's single largest band of contiguous spectrum below 3 gigahertz, and it's well suited for 5G deployment. We approved a tribal priority window so that tribal nations in rural America would have early access to this 2.5 gigahertz spectrum. This window closed on September 4th, and we received over 400 applications. Commission staff have already conducted an initial review of and have accepted for filing 157 of these applications. We intend to auction any remaining spectrum shortly after we finish processing the applications filed during the Rural Tribal Priority window. We also targeted rule changes to bring the 3.5 GHz band into commercial use. The rules for this band, often called the CBRS band, had not been optimized for 5G deployment. But with the leadership of Commissioner Mike O'Reilly, we designed new rules to promote investment in the band. This August, the FCC successfully completed an auction of 70 megahertz of licensed spectrum in the 3.5 gigahertz band, the first ever auction of mid-band spectrum for 5G. And we've completed the necessary technical work so that the band's entire 150 megahertz is now available for commercial use. The Commission's biggest move to free up mid-band spectrum for 5G is the swath of spectrum from 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz, commonly called the C-band. This spectrum is mostly used by fixed satellite companies to beam content to video and audio broadcasters, to cable systems, and to other content distributors. However, with advances in technology, these companies can now provide the same services using alternative technologies or considerably less spectrum. And that is why, this past February, the FCC voted to clear the lower 300 megahertz of the C-band and make 280 megahertz of it available for 5G through a public auction. All eligible space station operators currently using this spectrum have committed to an accelerated relocation to the upper 200 megahertz of the C-band, meaning that the lower 280 megahertz will become available for 5G 2 to 4 years faster than otherwise would have been the case. We are currently on track to begin our auction of this lower 280 megahertz of the C-band on December 8th. And just a month ago, the FCC at our September meeting proposed to make the 3.45 to 3.55 gigahertz band available for innovative commercial operations, while accommodating limited remaining operations by federal incumbents. This action follows through on the White House and Department of Defense announcement in August that this 100 megahertz of contiguous mid-band spectrum should be made available for 5G as quickly as possible. I'm optimistic that we will be able to auction this 3.45 gigahertz band next year. The bottom line of all of these mid-band efforts is this. With the aforementioned auctions of the C-band, the 3.5 gigahertz band, and a 2021 auction of the 3.45 gigahertz band, we are on a path to have a contiguous 530 megahertz swath from 3.45 to 3.98 gigahertz of mid-band spectrum available for 5G. That is 5G fast. By any measure, this has been the most aggressive FCC in history when it comes to spectrum. But remember, that's just one part of the 5G fast plan. We have been similarly productive on the other two, promoting wireless infrastructure and modernizing our regulations to encourage more fiber deployment. When it comes to 5G, we all understand that infrastructure will be essential. 5G's more densified networks will require that we, and by we I mean you, will need to install hundreds of thousands of small cells, an exponential increase in the number of antenna locations for our current networks. At the FCC, we have taken many actions to streamline our rules and make it easier for you to build, to maintain, and to expand America's wireless networks. To make it easier to install wireless infrastructure like small cells, we set a reasonable deadline for cities to rule on siting applications. We also set reasonable limits on siting fees, limits that still allow localities to recover their costs. We also clarified the FCC's rules for when wireless infrastructure companies want to upgrade the equipment on existing structures, such as replacing antennas on a macro tower or adding antennas to a building. These clarifications will accelerate the build-out of 5G infrastructure by avoiding misunderstandings and reducing the number of disputes between local governments and wireless infrastructure builders, disputes that lead to delays and lawsuits. To make it quicker and cheaper to enable new attachments to poles, we adopted our one-touch make-ready policy. Instead of having multiple parties sequentially prepare poles for a new attacher, as used to be the practice, a single construction crew now does all of the make-ready work at once. This not only speeds up network build-out, it also opens the door to new entrants who can increase broadband competition. And by promoting fiber network build-out, we are supporting the expansion of wireless intermediate networks too. Now, some local governments challenged our one-touch make-ready rules in court, but just last month, a federal appeals court rejected these challenges and affirmed the Commission's policy. We've also modernized rules to make it easier for carriers to transition from maintaining the copper networks of yesterday to building tomorrow's fiber networks. And we scrapped utility-style broadband regulation inspired by rules developed in the 1930s for Ma Bell. And these reforms have helped to spur record-breaking capital investments in infrastructure essential for 5G, including fiber optic cables for backhaul and small cells. In 2018, and then again in 2019, the United States set records for annual fiber deployment. And the number of new small cells in the United States, and cell sites generally, has skyrocketed. For example, in the 4 years before I became FCC chairman, the number of cell sites in the United States increased by fewer than 7,000. But in my 3 years in this role, the US has gained over 87,000 cell sites, with 46,000 of them in 2019 alone. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how the FCC has helped us go from a time where much of the activity around 5G was writing pie-in-the-sky white papers to a time of 5G iPhones and meaningful deployments of next-generation wireless networks. And here's the exciting thing. This is only our first glimpse of the 5G future. We've still got a lot of work to do, but I love what I'm seeing so far, and I can't wait to see what comes next. Thanks again to everyone out there, all of you, who have worked so hard to make this progress possible. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.